So here we go. Can see people entering now. Oh, look at that. They're all rushing in, which is really nice. So we've got people here from New Zealand. We've got people attending from different parts of Europe. Some people from Ireland, which is nice, very nice. People from Birmingham. I don't know where that is.
International.
That's right. There's people from Birmingham here. Yeah. We've got, oh, they're brilliant. Lovely. We'll just let people come into the room, settle down, people sorting out their audio, sorting out their internet connections, etc. And I will do a little intro and a bit of housekeeping in 2 minutes once they're all in. Yeah, oh, it's going up. That's nice. Lovely. Oh, it's nice to have so many people, isn't it? And imagine, you know what would be really nice? I often think when I look at these lists, what would be really nice if all these people were in a room together and they could talk to each other? Because you've got people from all sorts of walks of life, all different jobs, people who work for the union, people who are activists, you know, somebody out in Germany, I think it is, he's out in Germany. So, you know, imagine talking to colleagues and comrades right across the board. It'd be fantastic. After lockdown, then maybe we should have this, definitely. Have a look. What do you think, Roger?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
A little international organising seminar for everybody. It would be lovely. It'd be really, really nice. Okay.
There's an idea.
Isn't it?
Oh, was it?
Absolutely.
Right. Oh, brilliant. Right. Okay. What I'm going to do is just do a little quick, brief introduction. People are just settling down, and we understand this webinar won't last for more than an hour because we understand people's needs. People might be watching it in their work time, maybe got their lunch break, and also internet needs as well. And sometimes that's quite difficult if you're working at home. Sometimes if you've got other people using the internet, it's not very easy. So if you're used to these GoToWebinar sessions, we have at the right hand side, we've got a control panel. And if you can see there, you've got an audio area. So if you're having problems hearing us, please just click on that. And then you can see there's different buttons you can press, try different things, different bits and pieces there. We are going to record, it's being recorded now. So I'll send that out to everybody who's attended, so you can share that with colleagues and other union members as well. More than happy for you to do that. We've also got an area where you can ask questions, and we'd really like it. If we have time at the end, we'll answer 1 or 2 questions. So please just pop those in the question area. That's on the control panel at the side. Okay. I think that's it. I think that's it. I'm going to close my camera down, and then you can hear the main event. And we're really, really privileged and honoured to have with us today Ethel Buckley from SIPTU in Ireland. And we also have with us, very privileged to have Roger McKenzie with us as well from Unison. So I'm going to shut down now. I'm going to hand over to Roger and take it from there. And you'll see me again in about 40 minutes or so. Okay, thank you.
Right, well, welcome everybody. My name is Roger McKenzie. I'm one of the Assistant General Secretaries of Unison, the Public Services Union. I'm hearing from Monica that there's people from all parts of the globe who've joined us for this discussion, and I think that's I mean, I'd like to think it was all down to me and people were really coming to listen to me, but I suspect it's because of the guest that we've got today, who is the remarkable Ethel Buckley, Deputy General Secretary of SIPTU. Not just a trade union colleague, but I like to think as well as a good friend of mine personally. You know, when we were thinking of people to have on these discussions about organising, because we didn't want to just do it as a kind of speech and then people ask questions at the end of it, because everybody does that, and we want it to be a bit different. We just thought that it would be good just to have a conversation with people and just to try and see, try and get down to some of the real issues that we're facing as organisers at the minute. So what we will be talking about in this discussion, as well as the kind of how Ethel maybe got involved in the trade union movement, but it's also about some of those big challenges that we face, not least of which, of course, is the one that forces us to be in this kind of environment just now, where we're having to do this online and not, as Monica was saying, trying to have a in-personal discussion. And that is, of course, COVID-19, and trying to look at some of the challenges that poses for organising, but really learning the lessons of what happens in Ireland and what happens elsewhere as well. So that's the purpose of this. So can I welcome, well, before I welcome Ethel, can I just say you might be able to hear a load of drilling going on outside from me. I hope you can't, because somebody has decided they're putting up a load of scaffold over the road from me, and it's really noisy. So I'm gonna, hopefully, that doesn't disturb us too much. Can I welcome my good friend, my good comrade, Ethel Buckley, who's consented to join us on this conversation. You're really, really welcome, Ethel. Thanks for giving up your valuable time to come and join us.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Roger. It's great, and it's great to think. I'm imagining in my head who some of those people from those countries are. I think I may know some of our friends from those countries, but it's great. It's great that you're doing this. I've watched the other two interviews that you've done, and it's a fantastic format. You're really good at it, and so inspiring for me personally. I have read about and researched the work of Stephen Lerner and tried to, I ran a cleaning campaign once, contract cleaning campaign, organising campaign, tried to implement his strategies, but to have the opportunity to see him and to hear him, it was just great, fantastic.
Yeah,
I'm in esteemed company.
No, I mean, we're all in your esteemed company. I mean, I suppose the starting point that we have with these conversations is, well, how did you get involved in the trade union movement in the first place?
So I grew up in a really rural part of Ireland, in Cork, down the south, in rural County Cork, and there isn't much industry there. It's a farming community. My family had no involvement whatsoever with the trade union movement. My father was a plumber. My two brothers are plumbers. They ran a little plumbing business, my mother and father. So I didn't have my politics or my trade unionism passed down to me, as often people do, or certainly in the Irish trade union movement, often people are reared by other trade unionists and they get those values, or they're reared by social democrats or socialists, but certainly none of that for me. I will say though that my mother is a natural community organizer, a natural community leader, and maybe I got some of that inspiration from her. But
what were some of the things that she was involved in as a community organizer?
So she's still just involved. She's in her, well, I won't say in case she watches this, she wouldn't want me to say her age. But she's a community leader, I suppose, in that she has helped to maintain the heritage of that little village that I grew up in. During the Celtic Tiger, there was a boom here, an economic boom, where lots of planning laws were disregarded, and these rural communities were over developed, really, and she resisted that, and she got the community to organize itself to resist it. It was actually quite a historic little village. But she's also very welcoming of new people in that community. It's not a kind of a closed, we're keeping all this little place to ourselves. And she's also a folklorist, self-taught of that area. Yeah. And so a neighbour of hers, also an elderly person, said to her that he wanted to record her telling some of the stories of that place. There's a lot of history around the famine in that place, the Irish famine. And so she did that. They just made these little videos with his iPhone, and they were for, she intended them for the local primary school. But the National Museum of Ireland somehow saw one of these videos, and now her videos are on the website of the National Museum of Ireland.
Fantastic is that? That's great.
Yeah.
One of the things about you talk about stories. It's one of the things that I think we really have to pay much more attention to generally, but as organisers as well, because there just seems to me to be a lot of things that we get involved in, really interesting things that actually some people wouldn't even believe that we do, or we're kind of involved in some of these circumstances that happen. And we need to find a way of telling those stories to each other, but also wider as well. Do you think?
I couldn't agree more. And on the occasions that you have so kindly invited me to speak to Unison activists and organisers, and when the Kevin Lucas and Kevin Nielsen in the Northwest region have invited me over for the organising convention, I often say that one of the key things in my organising and my campaigning that's really important to me is framing messages. Yeah. And really being very careful how we frame our demands and frame our messages and how we portray them to the public. I think it can, it can be a game changer in campaigns if you get the right messaging. And as I often say as well, the mainstream media in both the UK, in England, in Ireland, they're no friends of ours, and they will take every opportunity to portray trade unions and our causes and our campaigns and our organising in a negative frame. And so we have to just be really clever about not allowing them taking the opportunity to not allow them to do that in every way that we can.
I always think that there's, I think that's dead right. I think that's a really important thing for us to consider. One of the additional things perhaps about storytelling is the role that plays in terms of creating not just involvement of people within our movement, but of helping to lift organisers sometimes, because sometimes we just need a lift. It's hard sometimes. We're not getting anywhere sometimes. Sometimes it's really difficult out there. You're getting up at the crack of dawn. You're not going to bed until late at night, and you maybe haven't had that much success during the day. And sometimes we just need to hear those stories just to give us a lift.
Absolutely.
Pep us up a little bit.
I mean, no one better than you to do that. We have that running joke with each other. Well, I don't think it's very funny, really, but where I say I'm never, ever again speaking after you at any kind of conference, event, gathering of human beings. Because I just remember, and I was talking this morning to the honorary president of SIPTU, Paddy Payton, and I was telling him what I was going to do this afternoon, and he remembers chairing a health division conference in Liberty Hall that you spoke at this time that I'm talking to you about. And not only did you get one standing ovation, but I think you got 2 standing ovations. But what was so important at that time, it was a really difficult time for working class people and trade unionists both in the UK and Ireland. We were being hammered with austerity, but you came with a message of hope, I think, and you came with a message of solidarity. But I remember you speaking about the NHS and how much you told a personal story of how the NHS has saved your life, not once but twice, I think. And you talked about your mother also, and I had never before that, this might sound strange to people in the UK, but here we don't see our health service in that way. We don't have as good a health service, we don't have as well resourced a health service. But in recent times, since the crisis has, the coronavirus crisis has happened, we're trying to, I've been working really hard on a kind of a reframe of our thinking along those lines about valuing our HSE, the health service, the public health service, because so often, we criticize it because it's not good enough. But in criticizing it, it can lay the way for further privatization of it. So to protect it is to tell a positive story about it, isn't it? And yeah. I think you do that. I think you do that really well, Roger. But I think Unison does that really, really well as well, about valuing public services. The actual services that people deliver, and that can be a tricky space, I think, for unions, because when you do that style of framing and messaging, sometimes the media will attack us and say, we're vested interests. They're a special interest group. They would be saying that about their members. It's really only a ploy for better pay, or these greedy unions. So there is some skill in getting framing and messaging right, I think.
I think it's very kind of you to say what you did about my speech that day, but I think one of the issues that I think it's really difficult for unions to, well, rephrase that. I think it's really important that unions do, and trade unionists do, is not to kind of separate ourselves off and we tell a story or have a discussion about something else and we're kind of removed from it, if that makes sense. I think it's really important that we are part of society as well. We are users of a health service as well. We rely on those services as well as anybody else. But public, it's how you can get people to understand that even though we're campaigning and organising for better public services, including the health service, that actually this is more than a political question, it's a moral question as well, but it's also something that we have fought for as working class people. Nobody ever gave us these things. We've always had to fight for them, and it's getting people to understand that we have to be in a position to fight for those things, and that's where we go back to organising, really, that because nobody ever gave us anything, we have to stand up, straighten our backs, lift our heads, and be ready to organise if we ever want public services to remain, never mind anything like they are, but to improve from what they are, because there's a whole bunch of people, as we know, who are wanting to destroy public services and think the profit motive is everything. We won't wish it away. We won't wish those people away. We have to organise, and I think that's what you do so well. Frankly, I think you grasp that, and I think you. I've seen over the years how you've been able to mobilise people around those messages that are not some highfalutin kind of message that is drawn up in a committee room somewhere or in a university somewhere, but actually comes from people themselves, and that's, to me, is the most powerful message.
You can't organise people if you don't communicate with them. I think that's one of the main things that I have learnt as an organizer is, when sometimes people ask people like you and me what makes a good organizer, and there's a tendency maybe to think that somebody who's really politically active. I might go back to my backstory about how I got involved.
I am going to take you back to that.
but in assuming that someone who's very politically active, or who is great socialist politics or whatever, can stand up and give a great speech, that those are going to be great organisers. But actually, of course, I have to remind myself constantly that the people who are great organisers are good communicators, but they're better listeners. You know,
Yeah.
listening is one of the keys to being a good organizer. When we're training, or when I talk to new organizers, I try and say to them that when I'm organizing a group of people or organizing with a group of people, I try to use that 80-20. You know, the full-time organizer is listening for 80% of the time and talking for 20% of the time. And you know, the thing is as well, and just reflecting on how I got into organising and trade unionism, it's bloody hard work too, isn't it? Nobody doesn't know, you know, if there's anyone listening today that's thinking of becoming an organizer for a career or for work, you have to really love it. It'll kill you otherwise to do it properly, because of those long hours and those long drives, and it's a lot, Roger, isn't it? At any level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you didn't have that background as a trade union or political. Your mom was a community organizer, a community activist. So what was that thing that got you involved?
You know what? So I found left-wing politics myself, and I do remember, and my family remember even more keenly than I do, I think, that even as a young child, I had a very strong sense of social justice, maybe, or more injustice. I was really keenly kind of aware of hearing about injustices in the world, and I had a visceral, physical reaction to hearing about some forms of injustice, particularly when I was or in my early teens, particularly racism and the child labor. Those two things, which in no way touched my life around me, but knowing that they existed caused a very deep reaction in me. And then as I moved through my teenage years, I found feminism first, and then socialism, and literally had a history teacher, you know, just that one person. I didn't know anyone who was a socialist. I didn't know anyone who was a trade unionist. I didn't know that they were trade unionists. Maybe, you know, my teachers obviously were, but just not in my world at all. And then when I was 17, I had a history teacher, and I wrote an essay about James Connolly, the socialist, Republican, founding leader of the union that I now work for. And I wrote about James Connolly, and I got an A+++ for that essay. And he wrote at the top, if I could write more pluses on this, I would. And I asked him, I said, you know, why did you think that was so good? And he said to me, I'm a communist. And he said, I'm a communist. I remember the Communist Party. And conversations with him when I was 17, doing big exams here, the Leaving Cert. I never know whether that's the A or the O levels, but the ones at the end of secondary school. And he just encouraged me. And then I went to college and got involved in socialist politics in college. But my absolute plan was to become an academic. When I was in my early 20s, I was studying geography. That was my thing, political geography, and doing a PhD on the American Indian movement. I was very, very interested in their style of mobilization, particularly in the 60s and 70s. So very specifically, my PhD was on the American Indian movement in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 1960s and 1970s. And I went there. I went to Buckley, a college in the Bay Area, really great college. And it associated with a lot of radical student politics and anti-Vietnam politics. And that place, I don't know if you've been to San Francisco, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been to Berkeley. Yeah.
You what? You've been to Berkeley?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that place was very formative for me, because that place, not so much now, but a few decades earlier, was a radical hotbed, and radicals from all over the world went to that place and went to Santa Cruz. I think it's in Santa Cruz Angela Davis is.
Yeah.
And here's the funny story. So when I was in Berkeley, there was a censorship ban on the leader, the president of Sinn Féin, the Irish political party, from speaking on Irish television. So he would come on, Gerry Adams would come on Irish television, RTE, and an actor would voice over what he...
We had that in the UK as well for years.
Right.
Yeah.
Section 31, that was called here. So I paid $30 to go hear Gerry Adams' voice when he spoke in Berkeley when he came there when I was a student. And I remember it was such a funny moment because he walked out on the stage and he was a very striking looking man, you know, jet black beard. I'm sure he, well, I don't know, black hair. And then he spoke, and I was like, that's not his voice. I was surprised at the tone of his voice, because I just associated him with whatever actor voiced him over. So Berkeley was quite formative for me. But when I came...
Before you move on, I mean, just another kind of similarity in our kind of upbringing within the movement. I mean, one of my biggest influences was looking back at the 1960s in particular, but also the early 1970s Black Power movements.
Yes.
In the United States in particular, but also kind of finding that in the UK there was also a very, very strong Black Power movement. And in fact, it's one of the debates that's taking place now. One of the things that's happened after the kind of main migration, the Windrush years, if you like, into the UK, was the use of the term black in this country was aimed at bringing together people of African and Asian descent, because we were experiencing the same issues of race discrimination in workplaces, race discrimination in communities where we were just trying to, our families were trying to live. We were getting things thrown through our letterbox, getting attacked in the streets, all sorts of things. And that point of unity that brought people together was around the use of that term black, and not, you know, kind of ever diminishing the fact that there are people of Asian descent and there are people of African descent. No question about that. But we needed a point of unity. And I learned a lot from that when I read back about some of the things that people were talking about and were doing. But actually the way people were organizing, didn't just wait for things to happen. People organized, and finding that point of unity, and then trying to work out ways that was gonna keep that unity together as best as they could, in the face of literally a life and death situation in the US, but also here too, for many people, and trying to find a way of building a movement that was going to make a difference. So, I mean, I think there's lots of similarities that both of us have kind of gone through with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've loads of different things to ask you about what you've just said, and to say to you about what you've just said. But I think it's really interesting, isn't it, that we both in our early formation politically and as organisers were interested in politics of identity and race politics, not just class politics. That's interesting. We ended up then in the workers' movement, but
you see a lot of the people that I was looking at. Angela Davis, you mentioned earlier on, my favourite book, The Autobiography of Angela Davis, was probably the book that got me really active, or gave me the spur to be active. But when you look at that book, very clear about the nature of class politics, but very clear about the nature of racial politics, but very clear about the need to organise in the best way that you can. And for me, that was one of the things that that I've taken with me throughout the whole of my involvement in the movement.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So
how did you get to SIPTU?
Okay, how did I get to SIPTU? So I went back to university in Cork with the plan to finish this this PhD on the American Indian movement in San Francisco, and I started working in the university, and I joined SIPTU, and I went the first day I went to work. I asked who was the shop steward, and I walked up to her and I was like, "Can I have a uniform?" And I was so excited at the thought of joining the union, and particularly of joining that union because I had been very inspired by the leaders of that union. There's Connolly, but there's also Larkin, who I often talk about when I'm in England, from Liverpool, Larkin. And then my own, probably a role model for me, a woman called Helena Maloney, who also was involved in the union at the start. So joining SIPTU was very important to me. But I will say this, right? I was a far left activist. I wasn't aligned with any particular political party. I'm not suited to being a member of political parties, and I'm not now, nor have I ever been. It just not my thing. I know it's other people's thing, but it's not my thing, and I respect that it's other people's thing. But so I would have been quite critical of SIPTU. SIPTU is Ireland's largest union, so a lot of people are aware of SIPTU, you know. And at that time, critical of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, which I'm now on the Executive Council of, because I would have perceived that the union was overly gone down the road of the servicing model of unionism. And I was aware from my time in America of a different style of trade unionism that had taken hold there, particularly, you know, the work around the SIPTU and this, you know, organising model, as people call it, which to me from the outside, you know, from just being a left-wing activist, seemed so much better than what we had in our country at that time, which is now referred to as the partnership model, you know. And so, but still, I was very, very delighted. I remember it. I remember signing the form and being thrilled with myself. And there was actually a union meeting on that day, my first day in the job. And I went to the union meeting with my heart pounding with excitement. No, it was not an exciting union meeting, but anyway, that's a whole other story. So I was a part-time worker, and I felt that it was there's legislation here giving equal rights now to part-time and full-time workers, but then there wasn't. It was before that, and I felt that the part-time people were being shafted a bit on the hours. We had to do the worst hours, like at the weekends and work nights and stuff. And I was complaining, complaining about the union. They're not doing enough for us. And the shop steward, who was a very, very wise and nice woman, encouraged me a lot. She said, "You know what? I'm sick of listening to you. Like, just do something about it. If you want to do something about it, there's no one standing in your way. Become the shop steward for the part-time people and do something about it." And I took it as a gauntlet being thrown down, and I did become a shop steward then for the part-time people. And literally, Roger, literally from the moment that I did, the officials in the union that I dealt with, one of my officials went on to become the General Secretary of SIPTU, Joe Flynn, who you would have met. Joe, the other officials that I worked with, both of whom still work in the union, Alan O'Leary and Eddie Mullins, just encouraged me so much. I didn't even kind of countenance at that time that I could become a trade union official. You know, first of all, there were no female role models that I was aware of. And, you know, if you can't see it, you don't know you could be it, kind of thing. So as it happens, all my officials were male. I didn't know any women union officials. I didn't come from that background. I thought it was a closed club, you know. But actually, my experience when I did become active in the union was the complete opposite. And the officials that I had really encouraged me. And I've taken that with me ever since. It's the importance of spotting potential activists, and I'm not a religious person, but I'll use the term, it's God's work to do activist development, to do leadership development with activists or emerging people who are becoming more interested in the union. If you see something in someone or you see a spark there, to really nurture that and nourish it. And I try to do that when I see new activists. Sometimes I might say young activists, but I don't actually mean young activists. I mean new activists, because in our union, people can come in their 40s, 50s, even 60s as new activists. So someone new. And you know, when you're doing this job for a while, you get a nose for it, don't you? You get a feel for someone who is more, wants to commit more and just has a bit of something about them, bit of leadership quality about them. So they encouraged me, and I remember one day Joe Flynn, who was my official, came into my job to take me out to do a union meeting, and he just had a swagger about him and a confidence going into the meeting. And I was really nervous as the shop steward. And I said to him, I'd love to do your job someday. But I didn't really mean it. I actually didn't really mean it. I said, I'd love to do your job someday. And he just stopped and said, you should do my job someday. We're advertising soon for officials, and you should definitely apply, like you're made for it. And that was very surprising to me, because I didn't think I was made for it. But his encouragement meant a lot to me, and I did apply. Now everyone, I often joke with them about this, all my officials said, no, there's no way you're going to get it on the first time you apply, right? You'll have to apply a few times, Ethel. Like, you have to, this is the trade union movement, you have to serve your time, and you have to, you know. But I did get it the first time, and I was anxious then maybe to move out of Cork, and I took a job in Dublin, and that's 20 years ago now. And
can I sort of take you back to a point that you made earlier on, that I want to spend a little bit of time exploring a little bit, really. It's about, you talked about that SEIU model of organising. So I wanted to get into that a little bit about, well, what is it about that model? And I'm going to be a bit of a kind of provocateur on this a little bit, because here we are it's a movement where the density of union membership in the United States is extremely low.
Yeah.
Number of people involved as activists, pretty low. And yet here is a model that is being put forward as something that should be followed. What is it about that particular model for you that meant that it needed to be looked at in more detail and maybe adopted within the Irish trade union movement, or certainly within SIPTU?
Why don't you ask me a difficult question? Okay, I'm going to try and think back and I'm going to try and answer that. So, as a political activist, I was involved in a movement in a community, a Sangha, you know, in Cork, of people who criticised the established trade union movement, and that sat fairly easily with me then. But when I actually when I became involved in the union, actually joined the union, became involved, became a shop steward, asked just my understanding of trade unionism moved and shifted very quickly. And I, you know, could see the real power of trade unions. But I suppose the thing back then, and this is 20 years ago, 22, 23 years ago, the thing that I noticed about some of the American trade unions was their campaigning just seemed to be very smart. Like the Justice for Janitors campaign, which is Stephen Lerner's, as I understand it, was a major contributor to the strategy in that campaign. You know, Lerner and people like David Chu and the strategic researchers and campaigners and AFL-CIO and in SEIU and the Teamsters, they realised, you know, that trade unions just needed to really up our game in terms of strategic organising, comprehensive campaigning, comprehensive organising, that we needed to do the ground, you know, the ground, the one-to-ones, taking people through that cycle that you and I have done hundreds of times, I suppose, the anger, hope, action with an individual. They knew all of that. They were very good at that. But they also knew that the AIR campaign needed to happen too. So is, you know, Lerner, the genius of the Justice for Janitors campaign is that they were doing the ground really well. They were doing their comms, you know, the communications and the media and all that. But they understood that the contract cleaning industry is really more like an employment agency, and that the real power in that industry was the funding source, you know, the building owners. So it was just, I suppose, seeing that full organising model in operation. And I really, really liked as well the empowerment of activists as I saw it then. I may see it differently now, but then and from the outside, it seemed like the American unions were devolving power from full-time officials to activists. And when I was in California, they were engaged in civil disobedience quite a bit. So you literally see trade unions campaigning and protesting with a view to being arrested in order to get into the media and to make their point. And that all just really appealed to me. As I've gone on.
You see, I was just going to say, while you know, there's an example. Those are examples. That's an example of the kind of American trade union movement, US trade union movement. While I was kind of hearing about all of that stuff, but one of the things that I also looked at was what was happening with the African trade union movement. In particular, one of the most formative things for me was the developments around COSATU, bringing together in the anti-apartheid movement, so bringing together all those disparate trade union and federations that existed in South Africa through into one powerful trade union movement through COSATU that had real political and organizational legitimacy with the people. And for me, that was a really kind of interesting model to look at as well. So I suppose one of the questions was that and I think it is interesting to look at the US model, but there's other models as well that we don't often hear enough about. I think that we can look at as a kind of organising to get some ideas from.
Oh no, totally. And I would just say as well, though, that for people who don't know the context in the Republic of Ireland, we're in a really challenging context here for worker organising and trade unions. Like, we don't have trade union recognition legislation in Ireland, so we're in a very hostile environment. A lot of the time, the reactions to trade unions and union organising in Ireland is set by or really influenced by American multinational companies that operate here. particularly tech companies, or probably the technology companies more than any. So to understand how the trade union movement in America has reacted to those companies is very interesting for an Irish trade unionist as well. But I couldn't agree with you more. Like, what I try to do, Roger, is, in as best as I can, though the English language helps, you know, is to stay in touch with the big, great organising campaigns around the world that are happening at any given time. And I've been just so lucky in SIPTU to have been, you know, have the union send me to meetings, international meetings of union organisers who are at the top of their game, the world leading trade union organisers in the style of organising that I want to do and you want to do, the organising model. And to be in rooms with those people and to, you know, get the opportunity to learn from Louise Tarrant, the Australian trade unionist, Kirsty McCulley, New Zealand, the Ep3 organiser, Crosby's one of my absolute heroes and mentors. Also to see that Dutch union, Bongenoten, very interesting union in terms of their organising, quite similar to SIPTU. That has been hugely inspiring for me and such a great opportunity. There's always something to learn from those people, and I'm just someone who really likes, I just really like to be around people who are better than me. You know, I'm fairly lively at organising.
I have no difficulty with that, to be honest. I find lots of people who are much better than me around organising, so I'll just try and learn off loads of them. So it's a real magpie.
Yeah, the opportunity to learn. Some people aren't like that. Some people, you know, when they get to a certain competence themselves, they get very comfortable with their own style of working, and they don't really want to hear about other people, or they're certainly not going to think they can learn anything from a Yank, an American, or, you know, and you know, but that's, you have to be open, don't you, to learn from people who, you know, do your practice and do it in an innovative way or a very courageous way. And I also, and I think it's good advice to anyone in their career, I'm very good at asking for help. I have no difficulty picking up the phone to you or messaging you saying, I need to talk this through with you, or I need your advice on this, or there are other people that I have in my community, which is the global community of organisers, that I would do that with Crosby. You know, I remember, for example, with Kirsty McCulley from Ep3 in New Zealand. She was in Ireland once, and I was really proud of myself and showing off an initiative that I was doing around. We were having a referendum on marriage equality, on gay marriage equality, and I was thrilled with myself. And I had this phone bank going of like lesbian and gay and trans activists and allies and members and all that. And I took Kirsty into the room and you know, she could hear people on the calls, and we had the call, pit pat, you know, all the conversation and all this. And she was like, yeah, that's great, yeah. So tell me, like, how are you tracking the activists that you find on the calls? What's that? How are you going to bring them into other campaigns, and what's their journey? And I was like, gee, could you not be happy with what but just always, you know, someone like her is always just that step ahead in ambition. Do you know, ambition for the work?
Yeah.
And
I want to, because Monica's appeared on the screen, which means that the time is getting kind of shorter. But there isn't a whole kind of issue that I do want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about, which is about this situation in which we find ourselves today. With the impact of the virus. We're all trying to deal with the virus in the best way that we can, trying to make sure we're there for our members as the absolute #1 key priority for Unison, and I dare say for SIPTU as well. What are you finding to be the kind of key organising challenges for you as a union, and just maybe one or two examples of how you're trying to get around some of those issues at the moment?
Okay, so the key organising challenge for us is that our strategic organising campaign, our strategic organising and campaigning department, our style of organising is a hybrid of lots of things we've learned from around the world, but it's very reliant on one-to-one conversations in person with workers. Very reliant on that. More than general meetings or any other forms, you know, flyers or anything like that. So the opportunity to have those conversations, it has been completely disrupted and not possible since mid-March. That's the key. So it's how do you take that style and somehow keep it operating when we're all working remotely. And I suppose one of the responses that we've come up with, and we have in no way, shape or form, am I going to claim to you that we are expert in digital organising or online organising, but we have put a lot of effort since March into getting a bit better at it. So that's just, so for us immediately what we kicked in with, or I kicked in with, is a new social media team, bringing much more resources into social media and digital. Great colleagues willing to change their work from doing education and training work or advocacy work or, you know, organising. So putting a lot of effort in there, Roger, and then trying to finesse our join online process, which was clunky. Took too long, and our drop-off rate was just way too high. So in other words, people would come on, we've very high brand recognition, as Unison would do, you know, so people would literally search for SIPTU or find SIPTU as the answer to a workers' rights question, but they'd come on, but they wouldn't convert to membership. So getting the time that it takes to join down, reducing it, we've got it down to 3 minutes now, and we've just made that a bit better, and we can see a small improvement in the join online. And then the other thing we're doing, you know, I mean, in some ways it kind of goes against the kind of organising that we want to do, but we have moved into advertising on social media, so advertising on Facebook and Instagram and in particular, and we're seeing a small response there to targeted ads when we target a particular sector or industry. So that's been a lot of our focus, and it's new work for me, digital. It's new for us all, really. And I'm sure there is a lot more that we could do, but it's converting that kind of surveying, mapping, having the conversations into the online space. But to be honest with you, I mean, we really look forward to getting back and being out.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're obviously facing the same challenges and have looked at the same sort of approaches as well. But I mean, this, you know, this can't end quickly enough for me. We need to get back out into workplaces, but we are where we are. I think what we ought to do maybe is take a couple of questions. Monica, do you want to? You got any?
Yeah, we've had loads of people joining us online, people dipping in and out, and some really nice compliments, people really enjoying it, finding the conversation really interesting, wanting to pass on best wishes from different parts of the globe, from the great nation of Wales, that's often pops in there as well. Somebody has asked
that he likes so much.
Oh, you've given it away. Me and my Welsh cakes.
That's it. There's a little fan club down there, I think.
Just Welsh cakes.
We've had a quite an interesting question from somebody called Kevin Nelson, and Kevin has asked.
Hi, Kevin.
He said, "What does SIPTU invest in organising annually, and how are those interests developed?" I thought that was quite a nice question.
How are those interests developed? What does that mean?
Those investments, I think that's what he means. So, organising investments, how do you develop them?
So the key question is how much do you put towards organising, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah. How much we put towards organising and what we aspire to put towards organising are two different things. So when we changed from that model of servicing to organising, our members at a special conference of the union voted 25% of union income to organising, but we have not got there yet. And the difficulty for us now is our finances are very impacted by the crisis. We're a general union, so our private sector membership in the services industries and in manufacturing, just tens of thousands of members have been laid off or being made redundant. Luckily, in manufacturing, they're starting to come back to their jobs now. So look, as the person responsible for organising, I'd say we never spend enough. But it probably varies from year to year. You can't be an organising union probably spending less than 20% of your budget, though, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe something like that.
Okay.
That's good.
Another question, Monica?
We have another question about priorities in organising, and how do you develop priorities for organising in SIPTU? So
do you think that's a question about picking targets?
Yes.
Yeah. Again, you see, our General Secretary, Joe Cunningham, always says we're target rich, too rich in some ways, because we're a general union. So there are so many industries that you could look to organise in, but I think I think one of the main considerations for us is sustainability. If we are going to spend the kind of budget that's needed to really make an impact on an industry or an employment, is the membership sustainable? In other words, is it, a membership where at some stage you mightn't have huge turnover, staff turnover, or obviously offshoring or outsourcing are also considerations of ours that would make an industry or an employment less appealing. But the industrial sector that we put most budget into, very deliberately, very strategically, I think, is early years educators. So educators of under fives, because that is a completely non-union sector, or has been before our campaign, entirely non-union sector in Ireland, and a minimum wage job for doing such an incredibly important job.
We need to talk about that. One of the priorities that Unison's identified is early years as being one of our key organising priorities. So we'll talk in the coming weeks in more detail about how we might be able to cooperate on some of that.
Absolutely, and take a look at the Australian the campaign that Crosby ran in Australia. It's very, very good model for early years educators. But yeah, so that's and a deliberate part as well about choosing that sector for us was that if Crosby said this to us, you remember him saying it at a conference and going, we're challenged in our union. I know Unison is completely different, but in our union, we find it challenging to encourage women to be shop stewards and activists. The shop steward base is way male dominated. So the opportunity to organise an industry which is predominantly female was very appealing to us. And to get, you know, literally hundreds and hundreds of great new women shop stewards and activists, many of whom quite young and really articulate, because, you know, to do that work takes a special kind of a person anyway. So that's been a real additional, as well as the membership boost, an additional benefit to the union in terms of our shop stewards base.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. I think we're just about running out of time now. So as I mean, in these now, I've decided, as I've created my own tradition in these webinars, which is to ask people who come into these conversations with me, because as you probably remember, I love my books, and I've got to have loads of books everywhere. So I ask people who come on this to give us a book recommendation, one or two, that's been important to them, either in organising or just in their development.
Yeah, so the book that I am going to choose, it could be a number of books, but the one I'm going to choose is the aforementioned Michael Crosby's Power at Work. I read that at a really particular time in my development as an organizer. And in that book, Crosby literally describes the work and describes the change that needs to happen in the union, which was what I was hoping to see happen in my own union. So that, and then I go back often. I mean, it's an old Bible to Rules for Radicals, Saul Alinsky, the community organizers book. There's a lot in that. But the book that I'm reading at the moment is, and it's really, really, really helping me, is a Buddhist book, because I have started a new daily well, not too new, but I have a daily meditation practice that helps me to clear my thoughts and make my mind a bit fitter. And so reading that inspires me. It's written by an Englishman called Matra Bandhu, and it's called The Journey and the Guide.
Okay.
So those are my recommendations. What? Give me one back, Roger.
Mine would always be the book that I've learned the most from in my life was the autobiography of Angela Davis.
Oh, yeah.
Because it really taught me about organising. It taught me about even when you're in trouble, even when you feel that you're on your own, is nobody, even though you can get support mechanisms and committees set up around the world, you have to organise. Those committees don't just happen. Change doesn't just happen, and we have to make it happen. That's why year on year now, for probably 25 years, I'll come back and read that book, and find something new in it every time. But always, the main thing that it does for me is it always inspires me to keep on going, always.
Great.
And for me, I just think you look for people and you look for opportunities to be inspired. You always inspire me, Ethel, always, which is why you're one of my friends. And I really want to thank you for giving up what I know is really valuable time to come and join us. We'll have you back at some point, if that's okay. Come back and we'll have another chat about organising. But you know, just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. I was not looking forward to it. I was nervous about it, but I've really enjoyed it. And I hope, you know, I really, really hope that I can be at the organising convention in Manchester in 2021 in March, because it will be great to spend time with you, and it will be great to spend time with those great organisers that you have the pleasure of working with, Roger. Some of the union organisers are the best of the best organisers I've ever met. And the way that Kevin Nelson runs that division, that region, growing year on year. It's inspiring stuff. And I had the opportunity of having Kevin Lucas in Dublin there a few months ago, and again, just chatting and learning from him. I would love that. Wouldn't that be
top people? I mean, we'll do that, but your invitation for me to come over to Dublin has obviously got lost in the post somewhere, so we can sort that out in the coming months, because we need to talk. We need to chat some more in person and do some planning. I almost said plotting then, but I didn't say it. But we need to do some planning for how we're going to work together and how we're going to help to build our movement and to spread the organising message. So, you know, Ethel, thanks ever so much for coming on. I'm sure people have been inspired by your comments, and we'll catch up soon.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Bye, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks. There's quite a few invitations have come through as well. I'll forward them over to you, Ethel, to attend different bits and pieces. Really positive feedback, and thank you everybody for joining us, and we look forward to the next organising webinar. Thank you very much, everybody.
Before we go, just say something about that. So the next one next week, Monica will put out the advert for this, but we've got a really special discussion next week, which will be about organising in a different kind of way and in a different setting. We're going to have a discussion with somebody from Liverpool, somebody from Cardiff, and hopefully somebody from Bristol about slavery and the legacy of slavery and the organising opportunities that come out from that. So look out for those details. Should be a really special discussion.
Yes, I'll get those over to you. And thank you, Roger. And also the recording of this session, which I personally found very inspiring. Thank you, Ethel. I really enjoyed that. Really inspiring. So I'll be sending that out to everybody as well, and we'll take it from there. I'm going to close the webinar now. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Ethel. Take care.
Bye, Roger. Bye, Monica.
Bye, Ethel. Thank you.